Good evening. My name is Jacqueline McDaniel, and I am the Executive Director for the Oklahoma Alliance for Healthy Families. On behalf of the Alliance and the Oklahoma Conference of Churches, I want to thank you all for joining us today. When the Alliance was founded about 3 years ago, we set out our mission, which was simply to provide education around vaccinations. Over the last 3 years, we've partnered with dozens of organizations to bring science-based information to Oklahomans and Oklahoma leaders. We are so proud to be partnering with the Oklahoma Conference of Churches and our panelists to share with us tonight on this very important discussion, faith in vaccines. We are so excited to have you all join us and hope you will invite your friends and family who may have not heard about the event tonight. So please share right now. COVID vaccines have not only brought a sense of hope, but also some questions with concerns. We recognize that families are being tasked with making monumental decisions and have many unanswered questions. Should I get it? Should I wait? Is it safe? It's okay to ask questions. Today, we want to be able to provide accurate information and resources on COVID-19 vaccine, and also encourage you to talk to your healthcare provider, so together you can make the best decision for yourself and your family. Vaccines allow us to be one step closer to returning to a sense of normalcy so we can take off our masks, get together and worship with friends and family safely. Millions of people have been vaccinated. Tens of thousands of people have participated in clinical trials for all 3 authorized vaccines. After being fully vaccinated, no participants have been hospitalized or have died from COVID-19 vaccine. With that, I would love to introduce our panel. Reverend Aaron Ballard is the executive pastor at Oklahoma City First Church of the Nazarene. He is also adjunct professor at Southern Nazarene University. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Pastor Eddie Espino is the executive and multicultural pastor at the Fellowship of Western Oaks. Welcome, Reverend.
Thank you for having me.
And last but not least, Dr. Audrey Corbett is assistant professor, also associate dean for clinical affairs at OU in Tulsa, and chief medical officer for OU Health Physicians in Tulsa. Welcome, Dr. Corbett.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks for having us.
Of course. So thank you all again who have submitted questions prior to today's event. And so we'll try and get to as many as we can, but this is sort of a conversation with all of us. So please remember, this is a judgment-free zone. So we encourage questions and open discussion. However, we do adhere to a be nice, be respectful policy. Any comments that do not align with that policy may result in participants being banned. So we are live today, but this Q&A, this discussion will be posted to both the Alliance page and the Oklahoma Conference of Churches Facebook pages, as well as our YouTube channels. So feel free to share if folks aren't able to join today or now. So first and foremost, this is for all the panelists. Are you vaccinated? And if so, if so, why did you choose to get vaccinated?
I would like to go first. So yes, I'm vaccinated. And, it was a personal choice, but also I was very encouraged because through the pandemic, my mom, she got very ill. And we're as Latinos, we're known for very close and we're always together and we do things together. And we're always at their house. And unfortunately, she got very ill, nothing related to COVID. But throughout that time, when she was at the hospital and everything was taking place, then pretty much we weren't able to see her. We weren't able to be around. And just a big fear came over my mom that we were not able to go to their house, even though it was nothing related to COVID. But just the simple fact that she was at the hospital just encouraged us children, and especially myself, to get vaccinated because I saw the importance for her health, because we want to see her around for a long time. So therefore, that was my encouragement to do so.
So I'll answer yes to that too. So yes, I'm vaccinated. So I am a frontline healthcare worker. I work as a hospitalist, and I have many colleagues who took on a lot of the COVID burden, and I saw a few of the COVID patients as well. But I can tell you, it was definitely. I can remember the day I got vaccinated, and tears of joy, just to have some sort of protection. I'm a teacher too, and at that time I was pregnant and had just delivered actually when vaccines came out, and so. I think there's a lot that went into it, but I would agree with Reverend Espino. I would say that I was really worried about my family, my parents, bringing it home to people, bringing it home to my daughter, and just the ability to protect them and know that I could do that meant a lot. So.
I am also vaccinated and received the vaccine as quickly as possible for a lot of the same reasons that Dr. Corbett and Pastor Eddie have discussed. I have grandfathers who are in their late 80s and early 90s. I have a 4-month-old daughter at home, and I have hundreds of congregants and students, and I want to protect all of them. They are, many of them, vulnerable in many different ways, and I believe that the vaccine is the very best way for me to love my neighbor, not just myself, because my health is also about what I expose them to. And so I was very grateful to receive the vaccine, and I'll get the booster when the Moderna booster becomes available, and I'm really happy to do so.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Did any of you have any concerns about getting the vaccine? If so, what were they, and what changed your mind if you did?
I really didn't have concerns. I just felt the importance of doing it. I just went ahead and did it. And I just felt at peace when I made the appointment. So I really didn't have concerns. Now that I think about it, I think it was just the peace of the Lord that probably helped me through it and get it over with. And I think that was the right thing to do. So the concerns were not major for me to kind of think about it twice and then maybe kind of push myself away from it. No, I just went ahead and set the appointment and did it without any concerns.
I am really fortunate to have folks in my church and folks that I teach with at Southern Nazarene University who are medical experts, folks who are epidemiologists, and folks who can talk about the ins and outs of clinical trials and can read the reports. And they said to a woman and to a man, get the vaccine when it becomes available. It's safe. Here's why. It will protect you. It will protect vulnerable people around you. And here's why. And I was grateful and happy to trust their expertise. And that has been true. And I'm grateful for that as well.
I think from my perspective, I saw what COVID could do. I think a lot of people have experienced that now unfortunately, have experienced it, but I watched it every day. And to me, it just, there's no weight, right? It was, you could have COVID and you could have these outcomes, or something could protect you with minimal side effects. And so to me, I was not concerned. I was encouraged by that. So.
Okay. So the pandemic has brought up many questions about faith and hope. Pastor Espino and Reverend Bolajak, what inspiring words can you share with our community at this difficult time?
For me personally, yes, vaccine is a hope, but when it comes to our faith is based on Jesus Christ. Our base is based on what we believe in, and therefore our hope, yes, it's definitely in the vaccine, in the medicine, but it goes alongside and hand in hand with our faith. And I think that as believers, if we put those together, they cannot be apart because concerns and humanly possible, you're always going to have worries and you're going to have questions and concerns. But if you put those two together, faith and vaccine, because it's a hope that you protect yourself, protect others, I think that those two needs to stay together.
Yeah, I would agree with Pastor Eddie that hope is a lot like the way we see the world and the way we understand as people of faith our relationship with God. And by that, I mean it is dynamic. It is not just about us, and it's not just about our neighbor. It's about both. And hope comes from the ways that we care for each other. Hope comes from medical science. I have members of the Sunday school class that I teach that are emergency room nurses at OU who are receiving the very most exciting is the word I will use, but not the fun kind of exciting, cases on a daily basis, who have been living on the front lines of the pandemic for a year and a half now. And my hope is in the way that they continue to love God by the way that they love their neighbor and continue to serve their community. Hope looks like pastors coming alongside the family of people who have died as part of the pandemic. Hope looks like the way that we build community with each other. And that's not just true for people of faith. Hope is in the way that we love each other. Hope is in the way that we care for each other. And what gives me hope for the future someday beyond the pandemic is the way that people of faith and people from different faith traditions than mine and people of no faith have shown love for their neighbors and for their community in the way that they have provided social care and medical care and pastoral care in really, really difficult circumstances. That's something I believe we are called to as people of faith, but it's something I have seen demonstrated by people of all faiths and of no faith. And I'm grateful for that too. And it gives me hope.
That's great. So over the course of the pandemic, many Oklahomans were sort of not participating in any in-person faith activities. And we know that that is so important for our family and our community sort of on multiple levels, right? Mental health and all of those things. So many of us are now back in person settings. So Dr. Corbett, how can we help ensure that every service or gathering is safe? What precautions should we take collectively, but then also as individuals?
Yeah. It's interesting how you brought the mental health part of it. And I think that's something that really we're going to see for generations based on this, right? And so just the focus on that, like, how do we keep each other safe, but how do we keep each other safe in a different way, that we have the companionship, we give each other that community, we give each other that hope. And so, I'm going to list the things that are very common that you hear. I mean, if I hear 6 feet of distance one more time, and I agree, distance does keep you safe. Hand sanitizer, cleaning your hands. I think we all learned how to clean our hands this last year. Masks help reduce spread. It's been proven. I know we argue it, but it's been proven. So those are things that I think that in our faith communities, you have to make decisions together for what's best for your congregation. And, I'm going to answer all those things. Of course, I'm going to say vaccinate. That's the best way you're going to do it. But at the end of the day, all of those things don't matter if we don't actively listen, not just listen, but actively listen to each other. So listen not to respond with what you want to say, but listen to make somebody feel heard about their concerns. And so that's the best advice I think I can give on that.
So there is so much information out there that it is hard to know what's true and what's not. So Dr. Corbett, we've identified just a few sort of frequently asked questions, okay? And also received some prior. So I'm just going to jump right in here. So first and foremost, can COVID vaccine actually give you COVID?
No. I'm going to say it louder. No. So, we argued this with flu vaccine before, right? But COVID vaccine has brought it back up again. So, there's 2 different types of vaccines that you can get. And so one of them is an inactivated virus that causes no harm to you whatsoever, that they put a piece of the COVID, it's called the spike protein, onto. That's the J&J. So that's kind of how the flu vaccine happens too. So that helps your body recognize it and create antibodies, but it does not give you the virus. The other one is the mRNA. So I try to think of an analogy here. So the way that I wanted to say it was, the whole, you give a man a fish, he can eat for a day. Teach him to fish, eat for a lifetime, right? So mRNA vaccines essentially give you the code to tell your immune system how to make the spike protein by itself, right? So it definitely doesn't give you COVID, doesn't give you any virus. It just gives you the code, which is mRNA, to make the spike protein so your body can react to it and create an immune response. So the next time it can recognize it and fight it faster. So that's kind of how I would describe it.
Okay. So people have been very concerned about sort of the rapid development of vaccines. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I actually went to another associate dean, but a molecular biologist that I work with just to kind of get some answers to these. And I think that the things that you hear is, it's so fast, it's just too fast, I don't know. And the technology actually has been around since 1970s, 1980s. They're developing mRNA, and I'm actually kind of excited about the future that it holds. And so what happened was, the technology was there. We talked about it with Ebola when it came out. But when it really realized that we could use this against COVID, then they helped that technology happen. But the FDA, what they ended up doing is they ended up just rushing the authorization. So they pretty much cut the red tape. So there wasn't anything different in the development and the safety and the efficacy of those. It was just that red tape in between.
Okay. So this is a question that came in that I've heard rumors about stem cells in aborted fetal tissue being used to create the COVID vaccine. Is any of that true?
So this one, I also had to go to the molecular biologist because I think this is a very valid question. And honestly, I think this question turns people away from the vaccine. It's definitely a sticking point. And so my answer to that, that I can say 100%, is that vaccine that goes inside of you, so the vaccine that's injected, there is not a single fetal tissue. There's not any DNA in it other, that you should worry about. There's no DNA in it. And there's nothing in that vaccine that is related to fetal cells.
Okay. So does COVID vaccine cause infertility or otherwise limit a person's ability to have a healthy pregnancy?
Yes. So my answer to that is no again. And I think it's a very valid question because it's one that you've seen quite a bit. And a lot of people deal with infertility, a lot of families, and it's a huge factor. The studies that they've done, they actually have done studies on female infertility and male infertility. So they actually took sperm counts just to see. And there's no difference that they saw in infertility rates for females or for males.
Okay. So a little bit along those lines is, this person asked, I have heard I will have a miscarriage if I get vaccinated while pregnant. Is this true?
So they went back and reviewed data over, and I will say lots of people who have been pregnant have been vaccinated at all stages, first through third trimester, right? Early pregnancy, even when they didn't know they were pregnant, they were still asking it. So the reporting system actually went through and went back and analyzed those to see if there's any relation, and they showed no difference in miscarriage possibility.
I would also just say anecdotally, my wife was vaccinated while in, I think, early third trimester and had no ill effects. And our daughter is beautiful. And she was very grateful to receive the vaccine and did so with the recommendation of her healthcare provider.
I think, Dr. Corbett, did you say you were also?
So I actually had I delivered, and I laugh, it was the beginning of the pandemic. So I was at April 2020. That's when my daughter was born. So I was breastfeeding. I will say that I was very, I ended my breastfeeding journey right before I got the vaccine. And I still am upset about that because I could have passed along. Supposedly there's still evidence and we're trying to figure it out. But antibodies, protective antibodies for your baby.
So another question is that many of our Muslim and Jewish friends have expressed concern about the use of pork products during research phases or possibly even in the vaccine itself. So is there any cause for concern that the vaccine is not halal or could be unkosher?
So from the direct reports of Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, they have not directly reported that anything as far as, and we're, when we talk about those communities, we talk about pork and cow products. And so that's specifically what we're asking. And that's a very valid question and really, really affects a lots of things. Gelatin capsules are usually made of pork or cow. So that comes into a lot of medication questions too. And so the answer to that is no. Right now, they have not reported that they have used any products. Now, development of vaccines, when you get into the details of it, that's kind of when you get into the weeds. And I am not a molecular biologist, but I will say that both communities, the Islamic and Jewish communities, have come out with statements that say that they are pro-vaccine because of the life-saving benefits. So.
And I would say, again, just anecdotally, our local church is the site of a vaccine clinic. We did that earlier in the spring, and we're back to starting that up actually this weekend. And our interfaith partners have actively sent members of their congregations to us to be vaccinated. And we've had faith leaders from Muslim and Jewish congregations who've come and who have brought their parents to be vaccinated at our site. And that's been a really positive thing, not a negative thing.
That's amazing.
And we're about to open one, make our church available for also one of those. So we're excited and looking forward to it. So we're working in the details. Absolutely.
That's so great. Thank you. Thank you both so much. For accessibility is certainly an issue, and neighborhood accessibility is so important, and familiarity is also so important when we have being able to make the vaccine available to people. So thank you both so much. So Dr. Corbett, can you talk about some common side effects?
So I actually did just get my booster. I was in the Pfizer group that qualified. And so I like to rephrase this when I talk to patients about it. So I would say your immune system responding appropriately. So I guess that's my technical term. So side effects. So when your immune system is responding to something, you will have chills, you will have fever, you will have kind of muscle aches and joint pains. I've actually heard a lot of joint pains with this one. And it's really hit or miss. And so especially with the mRNA one with the 2 doses, I've had, we could talk about it as colleagues all the time. Did you have any appropriate immune response to it? And so those are kind of things to expect. They're not long lasting. It's not because you have the virus. It's just your immune system is boosting. And so I think of it as a positive thing.
So can you just talk about what's the benefit? I feel like that's a silly question, but what's the benefit about getting vaccinated?
So what is the point? It is severe COVID, preventing severe COVID. So we all know that we can spread COVID, and some people can be completely asymptomatic, right? You might lose your sense of smell or taste, which I hear is very odd. But you could end up in the hospital on oxygen and worse, right? And so our goal is to prevent severe COVID. And so when you're looking at these statistics, which I think are being thrown around like crazy on how well the efficacy and everything's going, that's the ones we really pay attention to. How many people are we keeping out of the hospital, right? And so that is the effect we're looking for. And I can tell you right now, those numbers are correct. If you're in the hospital and you say you're unvaccinated, we take that note, right? And we immediately get concerned. We are seeing 90% plus unvaccinated now in the hospital versus the less than 10% vaccinated. And those less than 10% vaccinated that we see are because of an immunocompromised condition or elderly age. There's something that goes along with it. So I can't stress that enough.
So it sounds like certainly getting the booster is for those folks is pretty important.
Yes. For Pfizer, it's at 6 months since your second dose if you have a comorbid condition and age 18 or over. So,
okay. Mm-hmm. So Reverend Ballard and Pastor Espino, do any of these questions sort of resonate with you? Have you heard these questions before from your own faith communities?
Absolutely. And we're in a tough spot because, we're right in the middle. And we wish and pray that everybody would, be of the same mind, same, thinking. But unfortunately, we realize that everybody just thinks different, and that's okay, and it's okay to ask questions. And a lot of these questions resonate because I think we continue to get them. And as we continue to kind of get a little bit into the normalcy, we're into 1.5 years almost, all this, and we're barely trying to get back to normal here at the church. But then we have those two groups saying, why are we doing this and why are we not doing that? So a lot of those questions are great, and when they continue to come, and it seems like, when you think that they have asked all the questions, a new one comes, and we appreciate Doctor for, responding those great questions, because I think those have helped. I'm taking notes at the same time, so I'm not looking down. I'm just taking notes because, I love it. I love those answers, and we have a little bit more direction, because we can argue all day, but the direction that we can lead people, I think that's important.
I have been really grateful to the board of our church. Very early in the pandemic, they convened and said, we're going to commission a subcommittee of the board, and we're basically going to appoint all the medical professionals connected to the church, and we're going to ask them to review data and make recommendations, and we are going to follow their recommendations. And so we have had doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners and physician's assistants and all kinds of folks who have been willing to say, this is an area of expertise for me, and here's what I know from my field and from my practice. And the board has been very good about listening to areas of expertise outside of their own. And our pastoral staff, and particularly our senior pastor, have been really intentional about making regular video updates that we play in our services and we post to our social media channels, so that we can articulate, hey, we are 2 months in, here are the policies and the procedures and the precautions that we're taking. Okay, now we're 6 months in. Now we're 8 months in. Now there's a vaccine. And in some ways that feels a little bit like the goalposts keep moving. But in other ways, we have come back again and again and again to this idea of, we are going to err on the side of loving our neighbor, and we are going to err on the side of protecting the vulnerable. And we may not, like Pastor Eddie said, we may not 100% satisfy people on the far ends of the political spectrum, but we're going to do our best to continually reorient around, how do we love our neighbors? How do we love our neighborhood? It's not just about the church. The church is open 2 or 3 days a week as a church and 7 days a week as a community center. And so it's not just about people who attend our services or who belong to one of the congregations who meet in our building. It's also about the kids who come to after school care. It's about the parents who show up for volleyball practice. It's about all of the nonprofits who use our space. And we want to love them too. And we want to model for them what it is to love our community.
That's great. I actually had another question on that, but you took care of it. So we'll just skip right on. So majority of faith groups support vaccinations: Catholic Church, Islam, Christian denominations. So can you both sort of talk about what your faith tradition says about the use of vaccines?
We haven't really touched that specific topic, but again, it just boils down to what Pastor Aaron just mentioned. It boils down to, and if it wasn't for the vaccine, it boils down to caring about other people, and if it's somebody that has taken the vaccine or not, it boils down to how we show we care for them, and I think that that's the most important thing that we're teaching our people. That even if they do or they don't, as much as we push it, it boils down to put others first, and if it's through a vaccine, then, do it, and if you don't want to take the vaccine, you still need to care about others, no matter what, and I think it really boils down to that.
I agree that it is part of a bigger conversation. It's not just about vaccination. The answer to the question is very similar to, why do we provide hand sanitizer? Why do we encourage folks to wear masks? Why is social distancing important? Why are we taking all of these different precautions? The way that we offer Eucharist, the communion elements, we do that every week, and it's very different the way we do it now as opposed to the way we did before the pandemic. And it's not the way we want to do it moving forward, but it's the safest way we can do it right now. And having those weird little individually pre-wrapped plastic cups, nobody wants to do that forever. But it's a lot safer than having one loaf of bread that we tear off or having one cup that we share from together. But even more specifically than that, the international denomination that our local congregation is a part of has a very simple, very straightforward statement about healing and what it means to be healthy people. And it's only 2 sentences. And the first sentence says, "We are people who believe in divine healing and that prayer plays a role in healing. And you should do that, and it's a good thing." And the second sentence says, "We also believe in medical science, and we believe that this is also an avenue of healing." And so as people of faith, but also as people who belong to the Church of the Nazarene, we believe in medical science as a way that God brings healing about. We don't believe that science and faith are in competition with one another. Quite the opposite.
Yeah, that's sort of powerful, and I'm constantly hearing sort of the theme of love thy neighbor. It isn't just about us, but really it's this act of charity towards others, because to protect our neighbor, protect our family, but really also to protect those our kiddos who are too young to get vaccinated right now. And are immunocompromised, who sort of are at higher risk is if we aren't getting vaccinated.
And I would also just add really quickly, that's not a uniquely Christian perspective either. I have friends who are imams and rabbis and leaders in Buddhist and Sikh and Hindu faith congregations. I mean, here in the metro. And in each of these traditions, there's something very similar to love your neighbor. And there's something very similar to what we would call the golden rule, that we should do for other people what we want them to do for us, that we should embody that kind of charity, as you said. And that is a Christian ideal, but it's not a uniquely Christian ideal. I think people of faith and no faith across Oklahoma are embodying that during the pandemic. And again, that's part of what gives me hope for the future.
So we just had a question come in. I think this is probably Dr. Corbett's area. I've heard some people say that they don't need to get vaccinated because they already had COVID. How long do antibodies last after COVID recovery? And do those antibodies prevent you from transmitting?
So actually an article came out on this I want to say it was about a week or 2 ago. And so this has been a big question that we've been asking, because you do get some immunity, right, from having COVID. So they tracked these patients that have had COVID before, and they actually looked and said, okay, what antibody response did you have from that? And when it came down to it, it actually was the severity of their disease. So if they had a non-severe disease, they didn't have a strong antibody response. And if they had a very severe disease, your immune system's ramped up. And so they had higher titers of antibodies. We're still at that stage of trying to pin it down exactly. But what I've been reading is about 6 to 9 months after COVID, you become at risk again. So your antibodies drop off because you didn't have that stronger immune response. And so the answer is to that, yes, you should still get vaccinated. And we're recommending after your quarantine that you get vaccinated. And then there has been some newer studies, still new evidence on whether you need like a second dose of the mRNA vaccine. So I'm going to kind of leave that one open, but just say that evidence is always changing, right? And so there's still evidence coming out for that. Do these antibodies prevent you from transmitting? And so I think the thing that you have to think about here is the variant. And so if you if you had one variant at the beginning, and then you are exposed to Delta, even with vaccination, we can still get Delta. We can still transmit Delta, which I know has caused a lot of concern, because the thought is that we'll never have to transmit it again if we get vaccinated. That's why I got vaccinated. But that's just not the nature of viruses. It's not the nature of science. And what it does is vaccine prevents you from getting severe disease, right? And so my answer would be you still could transmit if you've had COVID before.
Okay. Thank you. That's that you're right. That is a great question, and that has been coming up a lot, especially now.
Yeah.
So I think some folks feel that getting vaccinated or wearing a mask indicates a lack of faith. So, Reverend Aaron and Pastor Eddie, can you talk more about that?
You know, I was thinking about that earlier today, and I don't think we can base our faith on any of those, because we can, you know, everybody can be struggling through of different disease or have different struggles, and you know, the mask, wearing a mask, doing the vaccine, and staying home, and 6 feet, you know, social distancing. That's once again, that's caring for others. That's not a lack of faith. That's actually, you know, putting your faith I mean, to work, putting your faith, because you know that the Lord also uses, you know, what medicine, you know, and he uses everything that we have, the resources, you know, for our benefit. So sometimes our faith also is based on that. And sometimes, you know, when we don't do those things, and when we don't put the example, we can cause other people to lose their faith, because, you know, if those are the resources that the Lord's provided, and many people don't see it that way. Many people don't see that mask is a resource that even, you know, God provided. You know, there was a time when we were running out of masks, and we had to run, I mean, all over the place trying to find some masks. There were some times when we ran out of disinfecting. We were running all over the place trying to find it, you know, and we saw it as a blessing, a resource, you know, that the Lord provided to protect. So therefore, I would say absolutely not. It is not a lack of faith to be careful and care for others.
There is sort of a famous parable in Christian storytelling about a man who is at home and a flood happens, and he is trying to escape the flood. And a neighbor comes with a big pickup truck that can make it through the water and says, "Hey, let me take you to safety." And the man says, "No, I'm fine. I have faith that God will save me." And so the pickup truck goes on. And another neighbor comes by as the waters continue to rise and says, "Hey, I have a boat and I can take you to safety. Let me help you get out of here." And he says, "No, I'm good. I have faith. God will save me." And then finally, a government official in a helicopter is over, and the man is up on his house, and the water is rising and rising. And they are yelling at him on the bullhorn, you know, "Let us put down the ladder and come with us. Let us save you and take you to safety." And he says, "No, I have faith. God will save me." And the water continues to rise, and the man drowns. And later, in a conversation with God in the afterlife, he says, I don't know what happened. I had faith that you would save me." And God says, "I sent you a truck and a boat and a helicopter. What are you doing here?" And like Pastor Eddie, I believe that things like the vaccine and masks and sanitizer and disinfecting and keeping our distance and making changes to our worship liturgies for now are all ways that God is at work helping us to protect the vulnerable. And I think that is a bigger act of faith.
That's a great story. So I think Reverend Eddie had mentioned this earlier about it's a tough time for faith leaders and faith community. So how can we help support our faith leaders during this critical time?
You know, I think, and with our lead pastor, we have had several conversations, and to be honest with you, and you know, and I know that this is, we're being watched by so many people, but I think we can be vulnerable and we can be honest, you know, and this is one of the hardest times that as a church, we really don't know what to do, because once again, we're right in the middle of two different thinking opinions, you know, and we want the best for our church. We want the well-being for our church. We want to make sure that our church knows how much we care, and that we're trying to make everything possible to keep them safe when they are in our campus here in our facilities. So this is one of those things that there aren't really any answers. So that's why it's important that more than ever as leaders, we stay close to the Lord, and we seek guidance, and we seek wisdom, because this is one of the times that we need wisdom beyond all the experiences that we had in the past. This is brand new situation and crisis that we're living in, and the families that come to our congregation, they need answers. They come looking for answers, and sometimes they expect answers, but as faith leaders, we can just be here to encourage and be there for them. Sometimes, we don't have to try to find an answer for them. Sometimes they just need to be heard, because they're desperate just to be loved. They're desperate to get out of their house. They're tired of following so many restrictions, and as faith leader, I encourage just, love on your people, encourage your people, be there for your people, be the maybe the shoulder that they might need, because some of those might have lost a loved one, and we don't have answers, because, why did they die? They were, they were followers of Jesus Christ, and we don't have answers, but we can be there. And that's what we have done in the last few months. Just be there, be encouraging, love them on them like never before, and just let them know that we will get through this as a church.
I would say something really similar to Pastor Eddie, but almost in the opposite direction. October is Clergy Appreciation Month. And if you are a member of a faith community and you have a rabbi or an imam or a pastor or a temple leader or a leader at your gurdwara, I would encourage you to reach out to her or to him and to let them know that you love them and that you appreciate the difficulty, like Pastor Eddie said, of trying to navigate the pandemic as a person and as a pastor, as a minister, as a faith leader. These folks have families, often many of whom include vulnerable members themselves. These folks are trying to navigate all of the consequences of a pandemic. And so health risks to our congregants and to ourselves, funerals, pastoral care, the economic consequences of people being out of work and of giving to faith communities being decreased across the board, the difficulties of hard conversations and trying to have them in ways that are loving, the difficulties of, like Pastor Eddie said, navigating between more than one perspective and more than one political allegiance, and trying to make sure that we place who we are as people of faith or as people of the state of Oklahoma, how we care for each other, make that first rather than our political or especially our partisan allegiance. So if you know a rabbi or an imam or a pastor or a temple leader, now is a great time to write them a note and say, I love you and I appreciate you, because I promise this is one of the most difficult things they've ever dealt with in their career, maybe the most difficult. And they're also living through it too. These are women and men who have kids who are learning it from home, and parents who are in danger because of their age, and young children who can't be vaccinated yet. And so these are human beings too, and they need to know that they are loved as they continue to try to pour themselves out on behalf of the people in their congregations.
I would like to add a little bit to that. I would encourage you, and don't isolate yourself. It doesn't matter, what faith base you come from. Don't isolate yourself. Don't feel like you're the only one that's struggling with this. There's many around you that are also going through the same thing, struggling with questions and concerns, and like Pastor Ballard, they even themselves have family members going through that. So seek help, seek wisdom and guidance in other ministry, faith-based individuals, because I will definitely know that, you will be encouraged when you realize and know that there's others that are going through the same thing with their congregations and their church this very moment. So don't put yourself in a corner, because otherwise the enemy will destroy you in that corner. And that's what we're trying to avoid, especially being in front of a congregation.
And like Pastor Eddie says, none of us are doing this perfectly, and all of us are better and smarter and kinder and more gracious together than any of us is on our own. And that's true regardless of faith tradition. We have a lot we can learn from each other if we learn how to lean on each other. And I think that's important.
Yeah. So you both had mentioned this and what you're doing to be part of the solution, which is vaccine clinics. That's great. So what other things can, if a congregation or faith community is like, I want to support my community, what are some things that they could do for all our panelists, really?
I think from our standpoint, we're always looking for partnerships. You know, I think the big thing that Reverend Ballard said was that, you know, the community that you live in, and you even develop that board of medical professionals. And so that's a face. I mean, I can sit here all day and tell people to get vaccinated, but nobody knows me, right? But if it's your community out there saying it and answering these questions, that has 10 times, I mean, million times the effect. And so, you know, from many institutions, the health departments, they're always looking for partnerships to set up those vaccine clinics and to reach those communities.
Yeah, we are really fortunate. We had an existing relationship with the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center, and they run something called the Unity Clinic in our community center on Friday mornings. And so it was a really natural transition for them once they had access to vaccine doses to say, hey, is it okay if we offer these? And we said, yes, absolutely. In addition, we have a lady who's connected to our congregation who works for the state of Oklahoma and says, I happen to know that they're looking for large churches who are willing to use their facilities for vaccine clinics. And if you are willing, here's the name and number. And we had that conversation on a Thursday, and the board said yes on a Sunday, and we ran our first vaccine clinic the next Thursday. I would not recommend doing it that quickly necessarily. There were some long days between point A and point B, but that willingness to cooperate, and we talked about it a little bit already, none of us is doing this on our own. We are all working with partners and with collaborators, and I'm super grateful and excited to hear that the fellowship is going to be doing this too. I didn't know that, but I know Pastor Eddie and some of his colleagues, Pastor Chris and Pastor Hardy, and they are phenomenal, and they will do a great job. And they will reach a different ethnic group than we will, and people in a different part of the city than we will, and they will do a better job of that than we would have. And it's going to take all of us, each of us and all of us.
Thank you both. So can one sort of final question here for all of our folks, for those who are still concerned about getting the COVID vaccine, I think we've all addressed it, but what do you want to say to them? Ideally, what would you say to them?
So if there's any questions, just reach out to somebody, right? So I think it depends on the hesitancy, truly, to answer that question. But just know that, I mean, your providers, your faith community, everybody is willing to listen and to answer those questions to help with that hesitancy.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to not base their decision on just something that they just hear on social media or one family member, because that can definitely impact your decision quite a bit. Inform yourself, seek information everywhere possible, and this is one of those resources that praise God for these resources that we have, and we have professionals that can help us understand a little. I've learned so much just this past 45 minutes, so therefore don't base your decision just because somebody said don't do it. Well, my uncle said I don't do it, so I'm not going to do it. That's not going to take us anywhere, and we're putting ourselves in risk and others in risk. But inform yourself, make sure that you're 100% informed of what's taking place so that way you can make the best decision for your well-being and the well-being of others around you.
Yeah, if I could add anything to that, it's just that it's really important for us to be gracious and non-anxious in the way that we interact with folks who have hesitation. You know, there is a person who's a part of the congregation where I minister who got their first dose in the last 10 days or so, and has been talking about it for a long time and has a lot of anxiety about the virus, but also has a lot of anxiety about vaccination in general. And there are all different kinds of things that play into that. And it took a long time for them to get comfortable. And it was a particular set of circumstances that led to it. But I know one of the key factors was they heard from someone who's a really important role model in their life, hey, if you're not vaccinated, I still love you. And I would love to talk to you about it. And I will literally go with you when you get vaccinated, and I will hold your hand and I will buy you ice cream afterwards, if that's what it takes. Not as a bribe, but as a way of saying your value to me as a person is not predicated on your vaccination status, but your vaccination status can do a lot to protect you and protect your community. And so I think it's important for all of us to be safe places for people to voice their questions and concerns. And it's important for us to say, hey, I'm an expert maybe in this thing. Like if you want to know what our denomination says about vaccination, I can quote, chapter and verse from our polity. Here's what we believe, and here's why we believe it. But if you have questions about epidemiology, I am not your guy, but I will send you to the lady who can answer that question. I will send you to my friends who are professors. But people are not going to come to us unless they know that they can trust us, and they know that we're not going to judge them or yell at them or hit them over the head with the latest set of CDC guidelines. And some days that's easier than others. But we've said all along, the whole point of this is to love our neighbor and to love our community. And that means being approachable for folks who do still have hesitancy. And none of us are doing that perfectly either. But hopefully we're trying. And that's a journey I'm on too.
Thank you. I just want to back up a little bit. I just had a couple of thoughts when we were talking about what can we do in our communities. We know that stories, like personal experiences, are powerful. And so encouraging people to share those stories. And I thank all three of you today for sharing those personal stories about your why, because that's important. I think, if someone knows you and they hear your story, that's powerful because there's a personal connection there. So encouraging folks to, if you're vaccinated, celebrate it and rejoice it and share that story about your why, because we all have that reason that's personal to us. So again, I thank you all for sharing that. So we have come to the end of our discussion today. That went by so fast. But we thank you again to all of our panelists for your time, to everyone who joined us today, and for all the questions. As a reminder, we are live, but this discussion will be posted to both the Oklahoma Conference of Churches Facebook page, as well as the Alliance Facebook page and our YouTube channels. So feel free to share right there. Just keep sharing. If you are still sort of hesitant and not sure about the COVID vaccine, I'm just going to reiterate this, encourage you to have a conversation with a medical provider, with an experienced, qualified professional about your concerns. Do your research and then take those questions and concerns that you have. They know your family's medical history the best. So they're going to be able to provide you guidance and recommendations. If you have received the COVID vaccine, thank you so much for doing your part to end this pandemic and to protect those who cannot be vaccinated. I could not end this hour without a friendly reminder that it is flu season. It's right around the corner. I feel like it's here. Flu shots are available at your doctor's office, your local pharmacy, your county health department. So please get those those flu vaccines. You can find resources in the comment section. I know that it's been sort of at the bottom of our screen. So please reach out and make those appointments. So thank you all so much and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.